How's it going, you guys? Scott with Everyday Solar. Now today I want to move those 4 Helion 360 watt panels to a little bit more of a permanent setup. Now this is not the final location that I'm going to put these panels in, but it is going to be much better than the 2 sawhorses and a board that I have holding those panels in place right now. Now I did build my own base, which I'll touch on a little bit, but for the racking itself I went with the EG4 BrignMount, and for the price is pretty darn compelling, especially with integrated features like the ability to adjust the tilt angle, whether you're adjusting that through seasons or just adjusting it to fit your location. So let's go ahead and open up that box, start the assembly process, and then get it mounted on my pressure treated temporary base here. So starting off, we'll just go ahead and unpack this box. It is an all aluminum setup with stainless steel hardware. Overall, it feels really robust, at least that's the initial impression, and that box length is the overall half the length of what the racking will be, since the rails are actually in 2 pieces for the top and 2 pieces for the bottom, which are right here. Then in terms of assembly, we'll start off with just the 4 different legs. This is going to be the most hardware, and it is smart to kind of take it easy on yourself, and instead of just an Allen wrench, go ahead and make sure you have a bit for an impact driver. I did dial down the torque my impact driver would deliver just to make sure I don't damage, knowing we have aluminum, and aluminum is overall fairly soft metal. But all you have to do is tighten up the lock washer a little bit, and then once that lock washer has a little bit of force on it, your impact driver will do the rest of the work, and you'll be able to torque everything down much easier than trying to do that with an Allen wrench, and it'll make much quicker work of the overall install. And then once you have the large and small U-bracket, you're ready to install these 2 pieces. The fixed distance piece goes in the larger one, and then you have an adjustable piece here, and that adjustable piece is going to give you the capability to adjust the tilt angle on each of the 4 legs, and then of course the overall ground mount. Now I thought EG4 did a pretty good job. They batch up all your different hardware in separate bags, so it does make each of these steps a little bit easier, where you're not searching for the hardware you need on one massive bag and just wasting a lot of time. So here again, I'm just going to tighten up that lock washer a little bit and then drive those and torque them down with the impact driver. Now the instructions do give you an end-to-end length on this adjustable piece, where you can adjust it to the corresponding length to get a certain tilt angle. Or you can just go ahead and get in your final mounting location. You can take your smartphone, which on that measurement app will have an angle finder that is fairly accurate, and you go ahead and lay it against that. I have 28 degrees, which is close to my desired year-round tilt angle, so that is what I'm going to go with. I could make small adjustments and get a little bit more tilt for the winter time, or a little less tilt for the summertime in my location. Now from a permanent mounting perspective, you're probably going to use an 8-inch or a 10-inch sonotube for each one of these brackets. In my location, I'd go below the frost line, so I'd be digging down 36 inches, setting that sonotube, filling that up with concrete, and then once that's fully set, I would be using the provided sleeve anchors. So these sleeve anchors, you would drill a 1/2-inch hole at least 3 inches, and make sure you clean out that hole. That's kind of the failure point for a lot of these anchors. You gotta clean out the hole, get all the concrete dust out of it, then you drive this in, and then once you go ahead and tighten this down on the bracket, it pulls a bell at the bottom up through the sleeve expands, and that's what really holds it into the concrete. So that's what a lot of us are going to do from a permanent standpoint. Because this is more of a temporary mount for me, I'm just using 3/8 of an inch power lags to hold it into my 4x4 pressure treated. And then the spacing for each of these legs is 51 inches between each leg. So I'm going to go ahead and get these mounted, and then we'll do the top and bottom rail. Now to get the legs in place, all I'm using is 2 power lags on each of these legs, and I also did add some 3/8 of an inch galvanized washers just to fit a little bit better in the slots. The nice thing is it gives a lot of play, so I'm just tightening these down, getting them in place, 51 inches between each, but I'm not securing them down, so I have a little bit of play as I mount the rails and get everything set. And then at the end, I'll double back, tighten up those 2 power lags, and add 2 more to the 14-foot long 4x4 post, which is that long member there with all the legs attached to it. Now for both parts of the rail, the top side, you will put together a splice which has 4 bolts in it. Now the one thing about the splice, it is also tying together both sides from a ground perspective. So don't forget these little grounding discs that need to be in place, and that scratches the surface, making for a better ground than just laying on top of the aluminum. And then we'll do the same thing here for the bottom. Now once those rails are in place, I can start to transfer each of my Helion 360 watt panels. I'll do the end clamp there, and then we have mid clamps. On each of those mid clamps, they're going to be a little harder to install compared to these end clamps, which are very simple. And that is because those mid clamps also have a grounding clip, so you can ground to the panels without actually having to add a ground bolt. And you'll see that shiny stainless steel grounding clip underneath the mid clamp. So make sure those are underneath your panels, and then that's what's going to connect the ground as we attach a ground wire to the top rail and the bottom rail. And then all those different grounding clips will tie everything together. So just finish up here with our last panel and we'll be done. So I'll touch on a few more things just wrapping up the installation, but I did want to give my overall feedback after assembling this. What do I think? You'll see a link in the description over to this exact EG4 BrignMount that I used. I think it's an awesome mount and reasonably priced. Depending on when you buy it, it might vary from about $250 all the way up to $400, depending on their sale or probably how the price of aluminum adjusts over time, since it's all made out of aluminum. But it is great for DIY projects. You get a solid mount for 4 large panels, and it's going to work great for my detached garage project here. So I do recommend it, and I actually have another one in the garage to double my capacity for future projects. So then if you've used all those grounding clips correctly, you just install your 2 grounding lugs that will ground both the bottom and top rail, and then you tie that together into your ground rod that you'll sink into the ground. Now for me, I'm not quite ready to set this in place. I'm going to move it a little bit. I have a lot of different projects I'll be using this ground mount for, but once I have it in place, I will use a 5/8 of an inch grounding rod, 8 foot long. I will sink that in. I'll actually sink it through these legs. That's also how I'm going to make sure that this is secured to the ground. I'm going to sink that through a hole I've drilled in this 4x4 post that's on the leg, sink the grounding rod through that into the earth to give me earth ground, and then my acorn clip will tie together my ground, but it also will hold down this leg just to make sure the wind doesn't lift up on the backside of this mount. Also, I think they've changed the design over the years. There are 3 set holes in this adjustment leg, so if you can get to one of these holes for your angle, the nice thing is you can set a bolt through that to secure it, opposed to just the 2 set screws, which could slip over time. So I was able to fit that in and then put 4 of those bolts, 1 in each of the legs. Now, if you need to sink your grounding rod now and you need some tips, I did do a little test a few weeks back on my other YouTube channel, Everyday Home Repairs. You can check out this video right here, and I'll show you how to use a rotary hammer drill with a specialty bit, but also just simply a bottle of water, and get that 8 foot long grounding rod all the way in the ground just using that bottle of water. So thanks for joining me on this video, and we'll catch you on that next one. Take care.